Welcome to AIL TV. This is again 6 o'clock. We have extended our start time to 6:30, but it's all good. You are going to be watching David Otto discussing issues concerning Cameroon. Now, without wasting your time, let me hand you over to David Otto from Stepped In, Stepped Out. David?
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Thank you, Africans in London Television, for this opportunity to present the Africa Security Update. Every week on Thursday, we always make sure that we try to get here for 6 p.m. But of course, sometimes it's not really possible to do that. Today we would want to welcome a special guest panel that we put together, which is a continuation of the Part 2 program that we had last week. Of course, today's program is going to be exclusively discussing the current conflict in Cameroon. But before I introduce my guest, I want to introduce the purpose of this program. So the Africa Security Update, again, is a weekly episode program which we talk about some of the events that are happening in Africa. We understand that insecurity in Africa is a key, impediment to economic development. And we want to bring security awareness to the African population because, in the previous times, people always looked at security as exclusively for the military, something that, cannot be discussed in public. But the essential truth is that, when these attacks happen, when these conflicts happen, it is the people that are impacted the most. So when there's a conflict between factions and between parties, it is the local population that gets, the biggest casualty. So it's important, we thought, that having these conversations where the public can send in their questions on matters of security, discussing in various countries, is a very essential part of creating an awareness. So we've seen again that there has been increase in security, focus in Africa, especially when we look at Nigeria, where we have existing factions like Boko Haram and the Islamic State of West Africa Province. When we look at areas in Niger Republic, when we look at Cameroon, when we look at Mali, Burkina Faso, we call that area the Chaco-Goma region of Africa. And then, of course, we go further to look at the Sahel, where we have Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State of West Africa Province having factions, in areas in the Sahel. Of course, we've talked about Somalia with Al-Shabaab, with having various, different factions that are fighting for so-called a state within a state. So I think it's important that in conceptualizing and putting together this program, we move from one country to another and discuss in detail the solution framework by getting a special, what I call a special breed of African analysts and specialists in various fields to talk about these issues to you, the audience, answer some of your very key questions, so that we can create more awareness, but also we can find a lasting solution to the African security issues. Again, I am David Otto. I am the Director for Counterterrorism and Organized Crime for an organization called Stepped In, Stepped Out. So we operate basically in the United Kingdom, but we have various branches in Europe. So it's important that I'd like to introduce to you a very able guest that we have today. Sorry for that intervention. I think one of my guests did not switch off their mobile phones. So let me introduce to you my first guest, Dr. Colonel Aloysius Mbako, who is a field intervention medicine specialist. Dr. Mbako, and as you've seen, Colonel Mbako has been previously in the Cameroon military force, as a doctor. He's also worked for the Israel Defense Forces, the Royal Army Medical Corps, And he's also an expert witness, in the United Kingdom. So he's got a very deep experience personally, but also as somebody who has been in the military and who has worked internationally. So he has a very deep understanding of the historical and will be able to talk about the way forward solutions when it comes to the crisis in Cameroon. Of course, we have the anti-terrorism specialist, certified specialist, of course, Mr. Sali Sadou Nana. He was here last week with us. He's somebody who has a very deep, experience on the issues in Cameroon, in Africa. He talks about these issues on various platforms, and his knowledge is going to be very, very helpful, not just for the panelists, but also for the entire, audience, which is actually following us today. Then we've got again with us today Dr. Manu Likoze, who is a lecturer at the Aberdeen University in Scotland. He's also a senior African security analyst, and he has written books on Cameroon. He follows the crisis diligently, and his contribution has been submitted to a number of local and international organizations on the way forward. So I think it will be interesting to listen to what Dr. Manu is going to be putting forward today as a matter of solution. So gentlemen, welcome to this program. You've all met our able guest, Mr. Joseph Otieno, who's always with us. He's always making sure that we have a smooth running of this program. But let me start by saying that last week we talked about the historical situations in Cameroon. We mentioned the fact that there has been an ongoing civil war. Well, not civil war, sorry. There's been an ongoing conflict. What is now termed as the Ambazonia Independence War between the forces of law and order of the government of Cameroon and separatist independent forces. Now, that war has been going on for the past 4 years, and it seems to be on a deadlock. There seems to be no way forward from where I am standing. And this is what I want us to talk about today. The solutions. What is the way forward? Now, one question which I've been having all about from our guests is what they're saying to us is, as specialists in this subject matter, they want to know what you've done personally, in your own capacity to, as Cameroonians, to look into these problems. So let me start by asking, Dr. Colonel Aloysius. The audience wants to know that all your experiences that you have with the situation going on in Cameroon. Now, what can you say that you've done as a specialist in this area to either speak to the government of Cameroon or intervene with the separatists and other movements that are fighting this war? Dr. Aloysius, 3 minutes there.
Thank you for giving me the panel. As a very senior person and of having worked in Cameroon for so many years, the Anglophone problem was really a very important problem for me and for a lot of other people. I actually belong to one of the first intervention groups, which is the Anglophone Cameroon Dialogue Forum, which was created by Dr. Moons. The Cameroon Anglophone Dialogue Forum emerged in March 2017 as a civil society network of individuals, social groups, organizations, and political parties, which were based in Cameroon and abroad, that were committed to finding a lasting solution to the Anglophone problem through a frank, inclusive, and comprehensive national dialogue that would be based on our country's history, experiences in living together, and the national cohesion in the mutual respect between the Anglophones and the Francophones. So that was the base on which we created this. And Dr. Munzo and ourselves made sure that we contacted all the stakeholders, including all the parliamentarians and all the senators, to bring immediately the consortium was dissolved to bring a solution to the Anglophone problem by dialogue. And I think that some of our agenda was carried forward in the Cardinals, which we know about the Cardinals initiative. And not only that, we tried to contact people on the other side, that is the extremists, and we had several meetings online, and we organized a meeting in July 2017 in Atlanta, which was called the Atlanta Debate, in which we were represented by Dr. Munzu and Dr. Eseme.
When you say the extremists, what do you mean? You mean the people who are saying
that...
sorry.
It's separatists. I shouldn't use it. Yeah. Separatists, yes.
Okay.
Separatists. Who are people with whom we speak all the time? Because from the word go, I was called into this, but to join them, and I refused to join the movement, but I gave the Mike frank advice about it, and we have always communicated, and we have tried to. Our agenda was to have a common basis for all the Anglophones before moving forward to put our problem to the whole nation, and I think that is...
Yes, let me just ask you, is it, what have you done since the conflict itself broke out, where there's been fighting in the last 4 years? Have you been able to speak to the government and say, this is what we think? Have you been able to speak to the separatist leaders on this particular issue?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. That is, we are talking about 2017, just at the beginning of the conflict. And we had a lot of exchanges we wrote to the President of the Republic. Of course, we didn't get any reply from the President. And we kept insisting. And I'm saying that our agenda was what has been actually used in most of our agenda is what has been used in the Cardinals initiative.
Okay, very good. Very good. Yeah, very good. Let me hear from you, Dr. Mani Lukunze. What have you done since this war broke out in 2016? Have you been able to reach out to the government to say, this is what we can propose to you as a solution? Have you been able to reach out to the separatist movement and say, we can bring you together to resolve this problem amicably? Go ahead, Dr. Manu.
Well, that's a big, thank you very much again for having me. Following up from last week and this week, we'll be able to discuss a few things. My position in this is a little bit complicated, so it might not be quite an easy question to answer, you may understand. But as an expert on security, my views, what we call in the UK expert comments, are generally sought by a few governments, both here in the West and in Africa. So I think my role in this is a better understanding. I wouldn't be able to solve any of the problems, but I will help parties interested in solving the problem understand the problem better. So my role is really enhancing understanding, and I think I've been fortunate enough to be able to provide my expert comments to very key players. I'll put it.
Yeah, and have you been succeeding?
Well, I have seen people say things that sound similar to what I've told them.
Yeah.
Because the way this works is that somebody asks you for an expert opinion, you provide it, but they don't confirm to you that they're going to use it or not. This is how security issues work. You provide what they need, and they will make a decisions on how to use it. So yes, you may see a minister talking somewhere and you say, this word sound like mine, but there's no way of you confirming that they're actually reading what you sent to them. So for those who understand security, you would know what I'm talking about. So yes, I do write a lot of these expert comments.
Yeah.
I've had my words in very high circles, but who knows?
I think it makes sense, because in security, as you rightly said, just like in the field of medicine, you can prescribe to a patient, but if the patient goes home and doesn't take that medication, it's not something you can influence.
Exactly.
it's the same thing. It's the same way that it works. You may have, met the government and given them your advice as to how to go about these issues. But again, it is not up to you to make sure that it's implemented. You've done your best. Now, let me come to you, Sali Sodunana. What is your take on this?
Thank you very much again, David, for inviting me back to the show, and also good evening to all those watching. I think with regards to what I've done so far since the conflict started, I've provided a lot of expert opinions, particularly to do with the ethnic dimensions of the conflict, like in the Northwest. For example, there has been a lot said about headers and how they have been impacted or involved in the conflict. So I have provided a lot of information, both to academic circles and also to both parties in the conflict. For example, last year I did a presentation at the University of Cologne on these kind of issues. I've been to Holland and I've also been to France to talk to various stakeholders about this. And also I have intervened in relief aid provision. And in order to help as an activist, I set up a relief aid project for which we have distributed relief aid in 6 regions, in 19 locations in Cameroon. The last one was in Yaoundé a couple of weeks ago. So that's also an element of intervention, and it's a way of engaging with IDPs and providing sort of views and opinions on peace building. I've also recently just set up a project on peace and resilience, for which I'm targeting 11 IDP communities in Cameroon. And the project just started last week. So those are some of the things I'm doing. Just like Dr. Likunzo, I wouldn't say all the opinions that I provide and the information that I provide to people, whether they agree with that information or they use it in some way. I wouldn't guarantee that, but I guess that it has helped a lot to create an understanding and also create a divergence of views for which many Cameroonians sometimes don't understand, especially when it comes to headers. It's an issue across West Africa, not just Nigeria. These are big issues in Nigeria, Mali, everywhere else. So I think that input is quite critical.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, gentlemen, for giving it, your diverse opinions, because these are personal interventions. Which, and the reason why I thought this question was important is because we are trying to promote an African problem for African intervention, to make sure that if there's a problem in a country like Cameroon, Cameroon has a huge pool of expertise in conflict resolution and in various areas, which I think the government can really pull from and ensure that these problems can be solved with local context, local experts, people who really understand the dynamics of the politics, the dynamics of the culture, the mindset of the stakeholders. I always believe that this is the way forward for Cameroon, the way forward for African countries. And when I hear from people like yourselves talking about your various challenges, but also your various ways that you've put forward to intervene in this crisis, I think it's a very laudable effort. And that must really be appreciated. I mean, personally, because I've got to answer this question as well, my own experience is that, yes, I have reached out directly to the government. I've written to the president, written to the prime minister, written to the foreign minister, written to the Vatican, the Pope, written to the Queen, the UK prime minister. I've written to all the most important, what I call important stakeholders. but also reach out to all the various stakeholders, from the Ambazonian side. Talk about the separatist groups, the leaders of the separatist groups. Talk about the leaders of the federalists, so-called people who believe in the same thing but don't believe that it can be achieved through violent means. Now, my own experience with this is that there is a lot of interest and there's a lot of response from the separatist groups to engage with the government in a dialogue. There's a lot of response from the separatist groups to engage in the government on issues of negotiation. But I find that the government doesn't really respond with the same amount of zeal to people like us who put forward a platform and a mechanism, which of course these are confidential mechanisms. I mean, these are not mechanisms that we can reveal on platforms. But when we put forward these mechanisms, we explain to the state how they are going to work. And my own expectation was that the government would have been a lot more forthcoming when it comes to resolving this problem. But also, you've got to understand when they talk about maybe issues of, the separatist groups, they are so divided. You've got the extremists on one side, they don't agree with each other. The government will always come up with something like that. But, my experience is that these are excuses, which, these are excuses which can be overcome if there is a will to resolve this problem. So, just to let my audience to know very clearly that these are some of the things that we continue to engage with the government and with the other parties, of the Anglophone crisis, to ensure that we have some kind of a solution. But again, as Dr. Mani said, you can prescribe these ways of intervention, but if the stakeholders like the government are not, interested in doing it at that particular time, then there's very little you can do. So it brings me to my next question. Now, it seems as if there is a lot more interest. Maybe the government doesn't want to talk to people like us. Now, I want you guys to look at the role that the UN can play, or the role that the UN has been playing. Do you think that the solution is going to come from the UN, from the African Union, from maybe the Swiss humanitarian dialogue of Switzerland? Do you think this war can be resolved from outside, if not from inside? I want to hear from you first, Dr. Aloysius.
I think basically my belief and the belief of my organization is that the main problem has to be sorted inside. We cannot have temporary solutions that are imposed from outside.
What's the organization?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, what is the name of your organization?
Sorry?
Yes, what is the name of your organization?
Anglophone Cameroon Dialogue Forum, the Anglophone Cameroon Dialogue Forum, which was created, one of the first organizations to be created in March 2017 with the purpose of bringing about a dialogue. And that is the first organization that talked about a dialogue, and that saw everybody, all the stakeholders, as I said before. Now, I think that this problem, we first have to solve, we first have to seek to understand the problem, and everybody in Cameroon, or most people, must understand the problem, because the root causes are in there, and if we do not sort them, we cannot have them sorted by exterior organizations, So I think I'm not sure what the organizations like the UNO will do, or the Organization of African, or the African Union will do, if we don't have the will to solve the problem. I think that's my stand, and we have to understand what the problem is, and we have to be on the same wavelength. We have to be on the same page, understanding what the Anglophone problem is. If we don't understand what the Anglophone problem is, there is no need nobody is going to force us to, to get a solution, which is surely going to be a temporary solution.
Yeah, Dr. Mani, yes, thank you, Dr. Aloysius. Dr. Mani, I need to hear from you, but let me first of all say that you've of course, you've spoken to the government about this, and the problem is still persisting. It therefore means that whatever you've said to them, they haven't listened, or maybe they are taking their time. Now, do you think that if it is not you or Cameroonians resolving this problem, is it going to come from outside?
Okay, so I think I would want to echo what the Colonel has said. I think the Colonel is very right to say that the first point of any analysis is to ask the question, what? So what is the problem? That's the first thing. So the Colonel is very right on that. But then the second thing is why? You know, what is the problem? Why is this what it is? And then before we could start talking about solutions or the way forward. So the question of what is still very confusing. What really is the problem? Okay, is it an economic problem? Is it a political problem? Is it a human rights or civil rights problem? Or is it a self-determination problem? Right. So this is very complex. We haven't even, we don't even know what the problem is. So even then coming to the question of why is it what it is, then before thinking about solutions. So I think there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of agitation, there is a lot of everything else, but the very basics are not being done. And that's why perhaps some people would say whatever has been done so far has failed, is because which problem are you solving? So I really think talking about solutions is kind of premature. That's why I said last week when you talked about deadlock, I was saying I wouldn't recognize it as a deadlock because what's happening in the first place. So yes, I think it's quite it's premature to talk about solutions because we don't know what the problem is.
Dr. Salinana, do you agree that we don't know what the problem is? Because a lot of people would say otherwise, that the problems of the Anglophone conflict are very clear. It is that the government is dodging away from the problem. Is that your view, or do you agree with Dr. Likuze, who says we don't yet know what the problems are? And again, I want you to touch on that before you answer the question of whether you think the solutions should come from yourselves or people like you, or should come from outside.
Right. Okay. I think in terms of a conflict, the Anglophone conflict is not actually very unique. So it is, in my view, is a conflict which is seeking to, is a group of people that are seeking to create an independent state. So, but there are also Anglophones who are demanding changes to the educational system, to the judicial system, marginalization, and all these kind of demands that were originally put on the table. So there are two, in my view, there are actually two issues there. One issue for which people are calling it different names, Southern Cameroons, Anglophones, and a different sort of diverse number of descriptions. They want, marginalization to be addressed and things like that. But then the people who are actually fighting with guns are not actually asking for that solution. They are asking to create a new state with a new national anthem, a new flag, and a new territorial claim. So basically, the problem, in my view, there are two problems there. So there's what is called the Anglophone Crisis, and there's the Ambazonian War of Independence, basically. So that's the way I see the problem. And in terms of whether the parties are trying to address the problem, I think that the conflict falls within the kind of cycle that conflicts go through.
Yeah.
So the conflict is in the process of conflict management. So the government is trying to contain the fighting in specific areas for it not to spread. is trying to restore security. The separatists are trying as much as possible to cause the place to be ungovernable and to attract international attention and to do all kinds of things. And the government is also having initiatives like talking to the separatists. For example, I mean, they released Success Congo and Leonard Nambere. I mean, they're trying to get people from the separatists to remove them from the from the movement onto their side. So all these processes can't just be nothing. That's part of conflict management. So like both sides are trying, and like the colonel said, there are various groups like the colonel's organization trying to mediate in between. So for on that aspect, on the aspect of whether the conflict can be resolved from externally or internally, I don't think it's a clear-cut sort of situation. I think the UN, the African Union, CEMAC, and all these people all have a role to play.
So you think it's the agency approach?
Yeah, I don't think that they will solve the problem, but they have a kind of a role to play. But we also know that the kind of prescription or the kind of suggestions that people are making, that if you sat down and you sign an agreement, then you stop the war, that's not exactly true from the evidence that we have.
Yeah.
For example, the conflict in Ivory Coast, there were many agreements that were signed. In 2007, the Ouagadougou agreement was signed with Laurent Gbagbo and also Les Forces Nouvelles, and the leader of the rebels was even appointed into the government. But that's still failed. So you can still have all these processes of sitting down, signing agreements, and talking. But in the meantime, I think what people should be saying is there needs to be more dialogue and more transparent dialogue following good practice of resolving conflicts.
Okay, let me get back to you there. Good practice of resolving conflict. Dr. Aloysius, I want you to touch on this point. Yeah, because there's been this issue of whether the government is now looking at the so-called separatists, or they call some of them, the government calls them terrorists. Now, before 2016, Cameroon has not seen this level of violence that has been ongoing for the past 4 years. It's never seen. Now, of course, there has been moments when the separatists, before 2016, had carried out attacks in very smaller scale. We know that. Now, Dr. Malin Nkrumah says that this problem is very complex. And I know that this is a problem that has been going on for years. People have been complaining. Is it just now that people are calling for independence? And also, is it just now that, in your experience, people are using violence? Is this something new to you, or this has been ongoing for some time?
I would like to come back a little bit on the problem, the Anglophone problem, because we know what the Anglophone problem is. It's quite well defined, but the fact is that we need to define it. As I said, we need to be on the same platform. We need to have a definition, look at clearly what is an Anglophone, so that we don't have somebody playing tricks, understanding one term when the other person understands another term, To me, an Anglophone has internationally recognized geographical limitations, has a distinct culture, which is a hybrid of local African culture and Anglo-Saxon culture, which has gone on longer than the German Cameroon, in terms of length. It has a linguistic distinctive Politically, it has been self-governing since 1954 to 1972. It has a different educational system, and it has a different judicial system. So those things must be understood by Francophones and Anglophones. We must be on that page. The second part of it is that there are three categories who are involved in this amongst the Anglophones. We have the government backers, We have the federalists who want us to return to the pre-1971 status, and we have the separatists or the Ambazonians. All of us have the same problems. That is, we say we are marginalized, and there is an attempt to assimilate us, and we have proof of that, written proof of that we are attempts are being made to assimilate us. Now, what the Anglophone problem is not just a corporate, educational, or judicial problem. That is the tip of the iceberg, and should not be used as the fundamental problem. So it's not also a matter of us living together with the Francophones. We've never rejected the Francophones, as you can see. It's not an obsession, on the other hand, to exalt colonial Anglophone heritage, or it's not an attack on national unity. And those who have gone overboard are people who were with us at some stage and decided that, no, enough is enough. And now let me come to the problems of Anglophone. I just want to summarize 6 areas in which the Anglophone problem lies. It is a criticism of hyper-centralized state. It is the transfer of the decision-making to Yaoundé, far away from the people, something we are not used to. It is the non-respect of engagement regarding the equitable respect of the culture, the institutional, legal, and administrative powers. It is the non-respect of solemn promises made during the Fumban Agreement. And it is the name, especially the change of the name, that is the straw that, breaks the camel's back, is the change of the state's name from the United Republic of Cameroon to La République du Cameroun, which is the old name of the French Cameroon before they joined us. So in that respect, there are two possibilities. Either we have been assimilated completely and disappeared, or La République du Cameroun has repudiated the agreement and the union we had, which brings us to demand to reinstate the Southern Cameroons, okay? So this is a problem. We must see that. The last and not the least is the non-application of bilingualism in the public sector, which disfavors. Now you find people coming right into Boya and forcing us to speak English when we are asking for papers or, all those other things. I don't want my grandmother to go to hospital and be forced to speak French. And that is not understood. And in the last few years, it has gone, and I think those are the points. I think those are very important points. If we don't understand those points, then we are going nowhere. Thank you.
I mean, those are recognized points, as you've said, Dr. Aloysius. We all know them. Now, Dr. Manilu Kunze, the government has initiated the Grand National Dialogue. Does it address these points that Dr. Aloysius has mentioned? And if not, do you think it will address it?
Okay, so just to pick on what the Colonel has said, this is precisely what the problem is, based on what the Colonel has said. The Colonel that's why it's very important that we help understand this problem. The Colonel has made a very passionate discussion and made a few points, and as a very concerned Cameroonian. Now, but I have to be an analyst. I have to work with a particular framework where I can give consistent advice to an international body or a government. Okay? The Colonel has made the first thing, the Colonel has gone to history and said there's some sort of a distinctive entity called the Southern Cameroons that have been self-governing. If you follow that particular argument, then the Anglophone problem is a self-determination problem under international law. The Colonel has also talked about decentralization and concentration of power in Yaoundé. Okay? If you follow that argument, then that is a political problem, because the concentration of power in Yaoundé is Cameroonian politics.
Mm.
The colonel also talked about, I think I'm forgetting one other thing. He talked about language,
Yes,
and
yes.
he doesn't want his grandmother to speak French in the hospital, and marginalization. Again, that is a civil rights problem where a minority within a state is being treated badly.
Yeah,
Now, so I can continue, and I will make a long list of these problems, and then I will ask you, which one are you interested in solving?
yeah,
Now,
yeah.
if you want to solve a minorities problem with self-determination, then you then create a problem of other minorities. So, for example, in an Ambazonian states, there will be so many other minorities, including Mr. Nana, who is Bororo, will be a minority in that state. Muslims will be a minority in this. So you create a problem, you solve a problem by creating another problem. So the minorities issue, we can discuss self-determination on the legal basis, the moral basis, or whatever basis. Then you could go to the political issues. How do you solve the problem of centralization? What kind of political conditions will you be able to create in Cameroon to solve the centralization problem? Then that's why I say, when I say that this issue is complex,
Yeah,
I'm not trying to deny the issue. I'm saying that there is a problem, but it's not particularly clear. And the groups that agitate are very different. You know, the extremists fighting now are secessionists. There's no evidence in Cameroon to say that this is what the Anglophones want. Because if you're threatening people who come and say their opinion with kidnaps and killing and slaughtering people on the streets, then people are not going to be honest about their opinion. So we do not know if the majority of Cameroonians wants to secede. We do not know this percentage of Cameroonians that are complaining about marginalization. So we do not have the evidence to articulate any of these positions that the colonel is making. All of them are legitimate positions, to be honest. But we just do not know which group stands for which one. So we go and talk to them to solve their specific problems.
I like your line of argument, Dr. Manu, but don't you also think, don't you think that when you measure the opinion of so-called Southern Cameroonians in a period when there is war, don't you think that opinion differs from that which could be measured before the war? So isn't it fair or unfair for you to think that by asking people's opinion on the Anglophone crisis during the period when there's war, you get some kind of a different response from what it was before the past 4 years?
That's exactly what I'm saying, that there's no way of knowing. I'm saying that because of the conditions on the ground, it's so tainted for anybody to be honest. So we do not know the percentage of Cameroonians who want to secede. We do not know the percentage of Cameroonians who are complaining about marginalization. There is no scientific method of knowing in these conditions of war. That is precisely what I'm saying.
Yes, Salinana, do you agree with these points? What is your take on them?
Right. The thing is that what the colonel is saying is what all Anglophones say about marginalization, about the issue of education, the issue of English, the issue of... There's an anthropological definition of being an Anglophone. So the colonel's grandmother doesn't have to speak English to be an Anglophone. An Anglophone is anybody who was in that piece of land that was colonized by Britain, whether you speak English or whether you don't speak English. But if you are from that area, you are an Anglophone. So that's the anthropological definition of Anglophone. So you have many that are illiterate, but they are Anglophone by the virtue of being born or brought up in that area. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is that the Ambazonian separatists that are fighting are not fighting for the words that we're using here. They are not fighting, they don't recognize themselves as Anglophones. They don't accept Dr. Munzu or Cardinal Tume representing them, or even other sort of well-meaning Anglophone representatives. So if you go to an Ambazonian person right now in Kumbu, in the Northwest region, who is fighting for separation, and you tell him that you want to solve the Anglophone problem, they will consider you as a La République agent. They will not see you as someone who wants to solve the problem. So the complication of the problem is that the people fighting for separation are only fighting for separation and a separate state called Ambazonia. And then there is a group of people who are fighting to resolve all these other issues that we recognize as legitimate. The issues of marginalization, the issues of domination of French, the issues of bijural system, the issue of having francophone teachers. So the problem is not that people don't know the problems. I think people know the problems, but the thing is that they are mixing them. Because right now, if you speak to any Ambazonian separatist leader or any separatist that is fighting, they wouldn't see the issues the way a large number of Anglophones are seeing it. Yeah. So I think that having the war has legitimized.
There is an echo.
Somewhere. Just
there's an echo.
Yes. Sorry, an echo. I think there's an echo. You're making a very good point there. And I like the line of argument. I think there's an echo. I'm hearing myself as well, but that's fine. Let's try and see if we can, begin to round up with one more thing in terms of the way forward. I want to get to Dr. Aloysius, because you guys are making some very, fascinating, points here for, on how we can move forward with this issue by dissecting the problems, understanding the various, areas of intervention, as Dr. Manu said. Dr. Aloysius, do you see this as, 6 problems, requiring 6 solutions, and, requiring 6 set of groups? Or do you see this as one problem that can just be resolved as one?
I see it as one problem that can be resolved. I come back. Let me disagree politely with Dr. Likunze, because that is a very manipulative way of looking at things, which is intellectual. And I think that that's what La République du Cameroon is using as well, because they divide the issues. These are the same people who went to the ACC1, wrote these same things, went to the ACC2, wrote these same things. People who participated in the constitution, who were thrown out because they thought it was a Nigerian constitution. They are the same people. It's the same, continuum of people. Some of who have got frustrated and have said, if that is the case, then we are out. So we cannot say that, they are very different issues. Yes, the people may be confused now because of the organization. And I told Siseko at the beginning, they didn't have a good organization. They had nothing to support them. They had no real organization. They just went in for empathy by saying, if we have a war, an international organization will come in and help us out, and so on and so forth. But, I think there is a solution. The solution is a recognition.
A little bit.
Sorry.
What I got, Dr. Manu Likunze, was that you listed 6 problems, 6 areas of intervention.
Yes.
Dr. Manu Likunze was to break down those areas and say, if you want to resolve each and every one of these areas, this is how you're going to approach it. Now, you see it differently, don't you?
But do you take a country and split it into those who want to eat corn and those who want to eat? If you take a country, you take it in total. We are all living in one continuum, and therefore the issues that are raised are all raised in one, there may be different issues concerning me in your house, or, you know, it's not just when somebody comes into your house, takes your wife, takes your plate, takes your, you cannot say that. You cannot complain. You can only complain about your wife, then you complain about your plate, then you complain about, you know, these things. This is a tendency. This is a tendency, and this is the way the La République du Cameroon tries to divert the attention or the argument by concentrating on other things, trying to tell us that we were all German territory. How the German territory we know about is not, some of it is in Chad, some of it is in Gabon, some of it is in Nigeria. So they are trying to tell us that we joined them by force, you know. They forget that we joined them by our own choice, you know. These are the things that we are saying, yeah. So those are diversions, you know. I don't think we should go into that. This is a problem that exists because we were a federal state. We were self-governing. So why do we not remain self-governing? And we were even, according to Aboy Machoy, one of the foremost Francophones who was a governor in the Northwest and the Southwest, we were even more united when we were a federal state than when now. So why are we being forced into centralization and marginalization and assimilation?
Good point. I would like Dr. Manu Lukunze to, you know, it's only fair that he comes back to you on that. Dr. Manu Lukunze, go ahead. 2 minutes, sir.
Yeah, I'll try and not get into the details, because this is how these arguments on this Ambazonia issue normally end. They just cycle and cycle around.
You don't want that. I mean, we're looking at solutions here. Yeah,
exactly. So, you know, it's not, you know, when you speak and try to speak honestly on this issue, people will start saying, oh, you're La République. This is how La République will want it to be. So you see, so that's sometimes...
Sorry, I just...
want to really engage this issue, especially in public. But in terms of solutions, it's, you know, we can wish what we want. You know, there is wishful thinking. There's a real world. Okay, we live in a real world of real politics and interest.
What is your real world? Go ahead, Dr. Manu. What is your real world?
We live in a real world of real politics, real actors, and a real international system. As I said last week, there are things that you cannot change. Okay, the international community is not interested in a new state in Africa coming from Cameroon. That is a fact. That's the real world. So you can advocate your secessionism. You can advocate your self-determination till the sky opens. That will not change in the short term. We're talking about solutions.
Yeah.
Now, so secessionism is a very, very limited option. As I said, the separatists in Cameroon do not have the military force to force that condition on Cameroon or the international community. They don't have the forces. You can look, as I said, look at South Sudan, look at Eritrea, look at the precise number of soldiers. We can be very mathematical in this. Look, how many soldiers did Eritrea have at the point of independence? How many soldiers did South Sudan have at the point of independence? How many states were backing Eritrea? How many states were backing South Sudan? Now, when you look at the raw mathematics behind Ambazonia, you see they cannot force secession. It's, you know, they're killing people, fine. So what? That's the so what question.
So what's the solution?
The solution is, as I said, there will be a security solution. The Cameroonian government will have to build its forces to deal with that extreme violence or seek help from the international community to do so, because Cameroon remains a legitimate state in the international community. They can get help from other states. Ambazonia hasn't successfully gotten that. Number two, that we could talk about is the issues, the political issues of centralization and minority rights, which, as I said, are legitimate rights protected under international law.
Yeah.
If you Mr. Otto, go to Germany and you're arrested in Germany, the German government will not judge you in German, even though it's a German country. They will provide you with a translator. It's same thing. If someone from China is arrested in the UK government will never take them to court and judge them in English. Even in England, that English is the official language. They will provide you with translation. So the fact that an old woman in Cameroon can go to court and be judged in French is an abuse of their rights. That nobody is doubting this. What then do you do about it? So when you have a clear civil rights issue that you could solve using political and civil rights instruments, and you start talking about secession and say, oh, we had our state or history, that is diluting your problem. So that's why I say we don't know what the problem is. There are legitimate issues in Cameroon, both political and civil rights issue, which can be dealt without anybody ever mentioning federalism or secessionism. And this is where I think the majority of Anglophone Cameroonians are. And there are even economic issues, which all Cameroonians are concerned about. These issues can and will definitely be dealt with. And that's why it's not good to talk about the history part of this doesn't make sense.
You make some very strong points there, Dr. Likunze. But again, my experience with the United Nations, even when you look at Eritrea or you look at South Sudan, the United Nations has never had any interest in creating states anyway. Those
you have to force the international community to create states, and you force them through serious war.
Perfect. Yes, I mean that's a very good point.
What I'm saying.
And whoever understands that should understand it. Dr. Alicius, I'll come back to you in a minute. Let me get to Sally Sedu. Do you agree with what Dr. Likunze is saying, that this problem is a complex one, and that there is no interest in an independent state in Africa, and that there are certain key underlying issues that the government needs to solve that it is not solving? And do you think if the government resolves those issues, without pussyfooting around them, this war is going to end? Do you think so?
No, because there are two issues. There are people demanding an independent state, and these people have been almost what I would call, they already decided that what they want is an independent state. They are not Anglophones. They are not Cameroonians. If you look at them on media, the first thing when a journalist introduces a separatist leader as an Anglophone separatist leader, the first correction they will make is that they are not an Anglophone and that they are not a Cameroonian. They are looking for a state. So if you solve all the problems that the colonel listed, that doesn't solve the problem of creating, of Ambazonia wanting their state. So that will solve the problem for the Anglophones wanting a federation or wanting not to be marginalized. So that's the first problem. The other issue is that I think when it comes to looking at the United Nations and other, the American government has said that they do not see the creation of a in Cameroon as an option. So Tibo Nagy has said this openly in an open meeting.
Why do you think the American government is important, to talk about issues like that when it comes to Cameroon? Why do you think so?
Yeah, because the secessionists or the separatists rely on support from America. America is very influential in the United Nations system.
Yeah.
The international system isn't just a fair system. It is a system dominated by America and other countries.
Yeah.
So America has said, we don't want this. The United Kingdom, in writing, has said they don't want a new state. So in terms of United Nations and other people, they have made it clear that they don't want a new state. But they want solution to the legitimate demands of the Anglophones.
Which has been solved or hasn't been solved?
No, they haven't been solved, but one wouldn't say they have been solved. But I think there are attempts to solve them,
Okay.
but not having solved them. So I think that in terms of solutions, I don't see any one solution to this problem. There is a menu of solutions. So you will have a menu of solutions.
Is your menu also 6 like Colonel Bako? Is menu of 6?
I mean, not exactly like the colonel, but the way I look at it is there will be solution to Anglophone demands and Anglophone issues.
Yeah.
So a bijural system. So protection of the educational system. Things to do with like creation of the common law branch of ENAM. Things like the demands that were made by the teachers and the lawyers initially. I think I can see that those will be solved. But the idea that you get a separate state will be very, very difficult unless you fight a very bloody war.
Perfect. Hold it there. Dr. Aloysius, let's conclude with you. How did the name Ambazonia come about?
The name Ambazonia, as I said, in 1984, when President Biya decided to name Cameroon, reverse United Republic of Cameroon to La République du Cameroun, which was he was challenged by Mr. Barrister Gorgi Dinka, our first president of the Lawyers Association in Cameroon, in the Federal Republic of Cameroon. Through a letter he wrote to the president protesting the use of that name, which, as I said, insinuated that either we were completely assimilated, that the Southern Cameroons, which was in the Union, was completely assimilated, or that the La République du Cameroun had repudiated the Union and therefore was calling for a restoration. He was arrested. The reason why they didn't use Southern Cameroon is to avoid the confusion between South Cameroon, which is the Ebolova area, and they decided to look for a local name. And Ambas Bay is the bay near Victoria, which is and Ambas Bay is a Portuguese term, which means historically the Portuguese arrived the Ambas Bay on St. Ambrose feast day, and therefore called that bay Ambroise Bay, and then that is how the name came about. And so it was adopted as a name for the new Cameroon. Oh, sorry, the new territory of Southern Cameroon.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. We haven't got time. I know that these debates can go on and on. But again, this is a very a very rich space for us to have way forward solutions on the issues in Cameroon. I am very grateful the arguments that you've put forward, the solutions that you've driven forward. Again, I call on the government of Cameroon to look into some of these ideas. They don't have to call the people on this panel. There are lots of Cameroonians out there who have experience in these issues that the government can seek their opinions and their expertise. We believe that resolving this problem in Cameroon again requires a very local intervention. But as the panelists have said, it's a mixture of having local solutions, but also having the international support. So we hope that this message is going to be very clear. Again, we will bring back the panel, sometime in the nearest future, because we've had lots of questions that have been sent to me. I would push them to some of you, and you can give your opinions as to what you think. I want to appreciate you, Dr. Aloysius Mbako, who is a former colonel in the Cameroon Army. Again, I said, worked in security areas with the Israeli Defense Forces. He's been a part of the Royal Army Medical Corps. I want to appreciate the certified anti-terrorism specialist, Sally Sadunana, and also Dr. Manilu Kuze, who is a senior analyst for Africa. I am very happy that we've had this conversation. Thank you to ALI TV, Africans in London TV. I want to appreciate our producer, Joseph Otieno Adamson, for this program. But above all, we want to appreciate the audience for taking their time to listen to your expert opinions. And gentlemen, thank you very much. And over to you, Mr. Joseph.
Yes, thank you very much. And well, Africa has got many problems, believe me. When I hear people talking about uniting Africa, uniting this and that, they don't understand. But I have just to apologize. There has been lots of comments actually coming in, but most we didn't have time to read them back to you. But what I'm suggesting is this: this program continues again. It's on Facebook and it's going to be on YouTube. So please keep sending your comments. It's very, very, very important. Let me also remind you, it is not only Cameroon which is having this problem. We have got Somalia and Somaliland.
Yeah.
You see, we have got even many other countries. So, but if I wanted to ask this question to the panel, what is the local language that is spoken to Cameroonians apart from English and French? So that would be the question. Probably that one would be for the next time. And maybe, Mr. Otto and I, we discussed these things long time ago, but then we traced the problems to the Berlin Conference, that is 1862. Can somebody...
1884.
Yeah. That's a very... Yeah.
Thank you very much for the for your participation. Until then, we will come back again. So let me find my thing here. Oh, here we go.